people are laughing as if they know the answer to what I'm going to say. I think it's a great idea and we should all join. Look, you could talk to union officials in the Service and Food Workers Union and the Engineers Union who will sincerely tell you that affiliation to Labour is of great benefit, and they can point to legislation that's been really useful. Service and Food Workers members, they enjoy better protection for cleaners, and that also applies to many of the people in Unite. So when the contract changes hands, the workers generally keep their jobs and their conditions. So they got that through lobbying the Labour Party and being very much involved in it. And the same goes for the pay increases for cleaners in hospitals. They're on starting rate of $14.20, I think, which was legislated for under Labour and directly a result of the Service and Food Workers' involvement in the Labour Party. But I think the problem is that the benefits do not outweigh the disadvantages. And probably the most vivid example of how allegiance to Labour can land unions up in a dung heap would be the fourth Labour government, which imposed a neoliberal program on New Zealand, and it was done in a way that no national government could have got away with. And the unions were pretty much probably taken by surprise, and they just weren't ready to fight against a party that they were aligned to, and it had a really numbing effect. And I think that still happens today, that affiliation, whether it's formal, I mean there's only a handful of unions that are formally affiliated to Labour, but many of the leaderships are aligned to Labour. It just takes some of that fighting spirit away, and there's an attitude, well, when Labour's in government we mustn't embarrass them, we can't attack them, we want to try and get a bit more out of them. When they're out of government, the mantra becomes, well, we've got to elect Labour again. And the fact is that after 3 terms of Labour, the union movement isn't bigger or stronger than it was in 1990 and in the 1990s. And during Labour's 3 terms, I think the unions mounted very few campaigns that were significant or particularly noticeable. I guess there was the EPMU 5% campaign, it had some impact, but probably the most noticeable one was the 90-day bill, which was directed against the National Party, which was in opposition then. So I think the key thing is we need to imbue a fighting spirit as a starting point and have no allegiance to any capitalist party whatsoever.
You know, I guess I was just saying that while I can accept, you know, a criticism of, you know, the fact that seeing affiliation to the Labour Party as the primary channel through which you direct union activity leads away from workers being more organised and more directly campaigning and organising against capital, I don't think it's fair to kind of undermine and diminish the kind of real gains that have come from people through that. I'm the first to say that in terms of major changes in wages and conditions, that's not the case, but they certainly have been significant for a huge number of workers.
Well, Workers' Party position is pretty clear on this. We believe that a union movement that doesn't fight for workers' freedom is pretty worthless, and that once you divide the working class, you just can keep redividing it over and over and rapidly weaken it. And that's why we're very much opposed to the whole line of Kiwi jobs for Kiwi workers. And we think that's a disastrous position to take, and dividing workers along national ethnic lines, treating migrant workers as the enemy, or at least treating them as if they're things to be discarded, it really follows a flawed logic that migrants are responsible for unemployment or are responsible for the recession or should be treated as such. So we've been very persistent on this question. And the other position that we're very clear on is that migrant workers are not charity cases either. They're people that bring enormous skill and talent and experience to the country. And just that the freedom to move should actually be a basic human right. That why should people be prisoners in any country? And those of us in the West, we kind of have a fair degree of freedom to move and work in other countries, but if you come from a third world country, you just try getting a visa to the West, and yeah, it's pretty difficult.
I understand that, and there's some demographic drivers that are going to drive migration flows hugely in the coming decades in any case. So, you know, I mean, I think it is an issue that is going to grow in terms of countries having to confront how they deal with migration issues. But I suppose, to be a little bit provocative, what I'd throw back to you in terms of the comment you made at the back about Labour being a capitalist party, you know, the challenge is for parties like yours to grow to be a mass party. The challenge is that while nobody, I don't hear people marching through the streets saying that global finance capitalism is a wonderful system, the kind of mass base and appeal that a communist alternative had, of whatever description, does not really appear to me to be there with many people. And if that's a failing around their consciousness or the role of social democratic parties, that may be the case. It may also be the case that people are looking for a new sort of politics around sustainability and green issues and that sort of thing. But I do think that the challenge has to be put back onto left-wing parties to ask themselves why the ideas that you put forward and the alternatives you put forward are not getting support, just as much as in my job in the union movement, we have to ask ourselves why we're not getting as many people joining the union movement and taking action as we would like.